Does being on maternity leave actually stop you from being able to purchase your bigger, larger family home? Definitely not. So often I come across a family who have just had a baby, so that means that mum is actually still currently on maternity leave. However, this is also around the time when mum's starting to think, well, hang on a minute, maybe this house isn't actually as big as we need it to be for our continuing growing family. I've helped many families purchase their more larger forever home while mum was still actually on maternity leave. In this case, I had a family of mum, dad, a 3-year-old and a newborn. So here we have a family of 4. Dad works full-time, earning $132,000. Prior to mum taking maternity leave, she was on an income of $76,000 and she's still actually employed with that current employer. We have a 3-year-old who attends daycare a couple of days a week, and that comes in at about $420 per month out of pocket for this family. This particular family have no credit cards, no existing debts. However, they did recently sell a 2-bedroom unit, which is about to settle within the next couple of weeks. So therefore, they were expecting $172,000 in cash, and they've also got $50,000 currently sitting there in savings, which they didn't actually want to touch for this purpose. When factoring in all of these figures, their borrowing capacity actually came in at a loan amount of $900,000. So this, together with their deposit of $172,000, actually allowed them to purchase for up to $1,020,000, making sure that we leave funds available at the side there to cover for their stamp duty. Now, if they were to purchase at say $1,020,000 and we got a loan for around the $900,000 mark, it does mean that they do need to pay a little bit in lender's mortgage insurance because they do fall short of that 20% deposit. However, in this particular case, the family just wanted to get into their more forever home because their whole idea was we wanted a 4-bedroom ensuite home so that our family of 4 can just comfortably move in, live there, and just pretty much stay out of that particular property for at least the next 15 to 20 years. Now, the issue that we had here was that mum was still actually on maternity leave and she didn't have any kind of plans to return to work for about another 6 months. However, prior to starting maternity leave, mum was actually with her current employer for about 5 years. Now, she's already discussed with her employer her approximate return to work date. So therefore, all I needed to say to them was, okay, well, in this case, are you able to get me a letter which says when you're planning to return to work, what your hours are going to be upon your return and what your income is going to be upon that return? Because that, together with the current savings that they've got sitting there in the bank that they plan to leave aside, i.e. that $50,000, that should actually be enough to get this whole approval across the line. So many people still believe that if you are currently on maternity leave, that you have no chance in borrowing until you've actually returned to work. Let's look at this in a more practical way. Dad is currently working full-time. Mum has been with her current employer for 5 years and plans to return back to that employer. We have no existing debts. We have strong savings history. We've got a good amount of borrowing capacity. It's pretty much a no-brainer. So why would a bank not look at this? Majority of banks will actually consider it. Now, when looking at your overall options, the way that the bank is going to look at this is we've got Dad who has his pay slips because he's consistently working anyway. We've also got a return to work letter from mum, which states her return to work date, her income and her hours. And then at the side, we've actually got about $50,000 currently sitting there in savings. So with these clients, they were able to purchase their property and there was still about 6 months before mum was returning to work. However, because there was a slight shortfall in serviceability because mum's income wasn't actually kicking in again until she returned to work, that's where we brought in that $50,000 that they currently had there in savings. That was able to allow us to prove to the bank that there is enough funds sitting there to cover any shortfall in serviceability between now and when mum actually returned to work. And just because there's $50,000 sitting there in savings doesn't necessarily mean that they have to actually use that. If they can continue to afford to make these repayments without mum's income, but the bank looks at it otherwise, then that's fine. They could still actually have that $50,000 sitting there available to them by the time mum actually does return to work. In this case, the clients went ahead and they actually purchased a 4-bedroom ensuite home for $990,000, and this gave them the space which allowed their family to continue to grow. It came with a yard that also allowed their children to actually be out and about playing, which is exactly what it was that they were looking for. So if you've been holding back on stepping into that larger forever home because you're currently on maternity leave, stop wasting your time. At the end of the day, like I mentioned, there are so many options out there that will actually be available to you that you're not too sure of at the moment. There's no point in missing out on that perfect property because you're waiting to return to work. Come and have a chat and we can plan what options you've actually got.